The crunch of metal echoed down the quiet suburban street, sharp and final, like the breaking of a soul. A twisted wheel spun once, then stopped. Screws clinked onto the pavement like falling rain, and a silence, far more violent than noise, took its place. She stood there, frozen, her little hands trembling as she reached out toward the remains of a brand new wheelchair, now nothing more than a mangled mess of steel and plastic. Her soft pink gloves still gripped the handle of her therapy bag, but her legs wouldn't stop shaking. It had taken them 9 months to get that chair. 9 months of insurance battles, fundraising, swallowing pride, and praying to every god that might be listening. And now it lay in pieces. Wheels snapped, backrest torn, the custom frame bent in half like someone had taken a crowbar to it. Which, horrifyingly, someone had. Just a few feet away, a woman adjusted her sunglasses and turned calmly. No emotion, no regret, just a quiet, calculated strut down the driveway, her clipboard tucked under one arm, her lips pursed in a smug line of satisfaction. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The damage was done. Her silence screamed louder than words ever could. The girl's mother ran forward, screaming her name, dropping to her knees and holding her daughter close. The little girl didn't cry at first. She just stared, eyes wide, blank, as if her mind couldn't process what had just happened. And then the tears came, tears that shook her chest, loud sobs that cracked through the calm of the pristine neighborhood like thunder. The mother wept too, clutching her daughter, rocking her, whispering, "It's okay, baby, we'll fix this. I promise we'll fix this." But the little girl didn't seem to hear. Her voice, when it finally came, was so small, so broken, it felt like it came from another world, a world where innocence had just died. "Why does she hate me, Mom?" And that's when it began, the fight not just for a wheelchair, but for dignity, for justice, for the right to exist without fear in the very place they called home. There's a time not too long ago when the world still felt like it could be kind, when the simple joy of a warm morning breeze brushing across the curtains and the giggle of a little girl chasing bubbles in a sunlit room meant everything. That was the life Lily had always dreamed of giving her daughter, Ava. Just peace, just safety, just a place where laughter didn't echo off hospital walls. Lily had been a single mother since Ava was born, and though life hadn't been easy, it had always been full of love. Ava was her sunshine, born premature but fierce, with a stubborn smile and eyes that danced with wonder. She was the kind of child who made strangers smile in grocery stores, who handed out crayon drawings to nurses during checkups, and who never let her condition define her. Ava had cerebral palsy, a diagnosis Lily received when her daughter was just 2 years old. It came with a hurricane of emotions: denial, grief, guilt, and eventually acceptance. Not because it was easy, but because there was no other choice. Lily chose to fight. She chose to learn every medical term, attend every therapy session, battle every insurance rejection, and carry her daughter, sometimes literally through every challenge. And Ava, bless her heart, met the world with courage that humbled grown men. But their old neighborhood, cramped and unforgiving, had begun to feel more like a battlefield than a home. The sidewalks were cracked, making it impossible for Ava's wheelchair to glide smoothly. The upstairs apartment echoed with stomps and shouts, and their landlord grew less sympathetic every time Ava's therapy equipment arrived at the door. There was no yard, no friendly neighbors, no community, just survival. So Lily made a decision. She dipped into her small savings, took on a second job as a virtual assistant, and after months of searching, found a quaint little house on a quiet cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood just outside the city. It was picture perfect: trimmed hedges, mailboxes shaped like birdhouses, children's chalk drawings on driveways, and best of all, a ramp already installed on the front porch. The listing described it as ideal for young families, and the HOA's motto was preserving peace, protecting community. It felt like a sign. Moving day was a blur of cardboard boxes, excited squeals, and the smell of fresh paint. Ava rolled around the new living room with wide eyes, announcing that the corner by the window would be her reading kingdom. Neighbors waved from porches. A couple even dropped by with cookies. It felt warm. It felt right. That night, as Lily tucked Ava into bed, their first night in a place they could finally call their own, she whispered, "This is our new beginning, sweet pea. No more noise. No more hospital stairs. Just home." But peace, it seemed, had a very specific definition in their new neighborhood, and not everyone agreed on who deserved it. In the first week, a polite but cold woman knocked on Lily's door. She introduced herself as Karen, president of the HOA, and handed over a thick welcome packet filled with rules, expectations, and fine print policies that felt more like a legal trap than a gesture of hospitality. Still, Lily tried. She filled out the forms, smiled through awkward conversations, and attended the first HOA meeting with hope in her heart. Ava even made a friend down the block, a sweet boy named Miles, who helped push her wheelchair to the local playground. Things felt almost normal, but small things began to creep in. A notice about Ava's therapy swing being visually disruptive to neighborhood aesthetics. A complaint about the noise levels from Ava's laughter during her backyard play sessions. An anonymous note questioning whether her customized ramp followed HOA-approved design. Lily brushed them off at first. Maybe people just needed time to adjust. Maybe they weren't used to a family like hers. Loud with love, unfiltered with joy, and visibly different. But deep down, something had shifted. That smile Karen wore on her first visit no longer felt neighborly. It felt calculated, measured, like a mask. Still, Lily held on. Because the thought of moving again, of packing up Ava's life and starting over again, was unbearable. Because Ava was finally sleeping through the night. Because they had a yard now. Because Lily believed in second chances, in redemption, in the goodness of people. What she didn't know then was that this neighborhood, this HOA, and this smiling woman at the center of it all would soon wage a quiet war against them. One that wouldn't just test her strength as a mother, but as a fighter for dignity, for truth, and for the very soul of her child. She always smiled. That was the thing about her. Always smiled, just not with her eyes. Her name was Karen Whitmore, president of the Willow Creek HOA for 7 consecutive years, 3-time Neighborhood Beautification Award winner, and self-proclaimed guardian of community standards. Her lawn was the greenest on the block, trimmed with military precision. Her welcome mat read, "Peace lives here," but the look in her eyes said, "Only if I say so." Karen first appeared on Lily's doorstep within 48 hours of their move-in. She arrived with a clipboard, a bottle of lukewarm sparkling cider, and a smile that tried to look friendly but felt more like an evaluation. Lily, still in her paint-smeared t-shirt and exhausted from the chaos of unpacking, greeted her with a warm thank you. Ava peeked from behind the doorframe, curious and hopeful. But Karen's eyes flicked to the wheelchair with barely a flicker of acknowledgement. "I just wanted to welcome you personally," Karen had said, her tone sugary and practiced. "We're a very tight-knit community. Very orderly." Her voice lingered on that last word like it was a warning. She handed Lily the HOA manual, a binder so thick it could qualify as a weapon, and went over the basics. No holiday lights before Thanksgiving, no personalized mailbox art, trash bins must be hidden from view, all lawn decorations must be HOA approved. Lily nodded politely, half listening, half wondering if this was how all suburbs operated. Then came the first subtle jab. "I noticed your ramp," Karen said lightly, glancing toward the small, beautifully crafted wooden structure at the front porch. "It's functional, but the color doesn't match our neighborhood aesthetic. We prefer natural tones that blend with the landscaping. You understand." Lily blinked. The ramp had been professionally installed and stained a soft walnut. It did blend. But Karen was already flipping through a page in the manual, pointing to an arbitrary guideline about structural add-ons requiring prior approval. "I'm sure it's just a small oversight," she added, flashing another thin-lipped smile. "We'll sort out." Over the next few weeks, Karen's visits became routine. She always arrived with that same notepad, jotting things down, occasionally snapping photos for records, and delivering subtle corrections disguised as neighborly advice. When Ava set up sidewalk chalk drawings with Miles, Karen called it visual clutter. When Lily hung wind chimes outside Ava's window, Karen left a note that read, "Sound carries. Let's be mindful of serenity." And when Ava's therapy equipment was temporarily stored near the driveway after a long day at physical therapy, Karen made a point of stopping by to say, "We all have challenges, dear, but public spaces should remain inviting for everyone." There was always a smile, always that soft voice, almost pitying, almost sweet, that made it hard to accuse her of anything real. It was passive aggressiveness honed to an art form. She was the kind of woman who'd hand you a cake while lighting your porch on fire. What stung more than the rules were the looks. Karen never said anything cruel in front of others. No outright insults. No slurs. But she always looked at Ava like she was too much, too loud, too present, as if her wheelchair was an inconvenience to the pristine order Karen had built. The final straw, at least for Lily, came during the HOA's monthly community gathering. They were holding it in the park near the community center, and Lily had rolled Ava across the lawn herself. It was a good day, the kind of day Lily prayed for. Ava was smiling. The sun was gentle, and for once, it felt like they were a part of something. Until Karen took the mic. She gave her usual speech, updates on neighborhood maintenance, upcoming holiday policies, and then she slipped it in. "We've had several concerns about sidewalk safety," she said, turning slightly in Lily's direction. "We love all our residents of all abilities, but we must ensure walkways remain accessible to everyone. That includes monitoring the use of extra-wide assistive devices." Lily's heart stopped. She felt the sting of every pair of eyes, saw the subtle glance of a woman whispering to her husband. She didn't say Ava's name. She didn't need to. And then she smiled again. It was in that moment Lily realized this wasn't about rules. It wasn't about order. It was about control. About Karen's desperate need to keep anything different in a tight, tidy box or drive it out entirely. From that day on, the smile on Karen's face no longer fooled Lily. Behind that neatly pressed blouse and color-coded clipboard was a woman who would stop at nothing to remind others who was really in charge, and that included a little girl in a wheelchair. Because to Karen, peace didn't mean kindness. It meant silence, and Lily was about to shatter it. It started with a letter, typed in perfect alignment, on HOA letterhead with a tone so polite it bordered on cruel. The letter informed Lily that her front ramp, the very one Ava depended on to leave the house, was in violation of Neighborhood Code 17B, subsection C. Permanent structural additions visible from the street must be pre-approved by the board and must align with the neighborhood's natural palette. There was no warning, no grace period, just a demand. Remove or repaint the ramp within 10 business days or face a fine of $150 per day. Lily stared at the paper in disbelief. The ramp had come with the house. It had been there when they bought it. But when she contacted the previous homeowner, he explained that he'd received verbal permission from a previous board. No paperwork. No written exception. Nothing Karen couldn't erase with a single meeting. Lily appealed, of course. She emailed the HOA board, explained Ava's medical condition, attached doctor's notes, even offered to repaint the ramp if the color was really the issue. But no one responded. No one dared challenge Karen. The fine appeared on her next HOA statement. $300, then $450, then $600. And just like that, the ramp that allowed her daughter access to the world had become a symbol of rebellion. A target, but that was only the beginning. Next came the noise complaints. Ava's laughter in the backyard during therapy became disruptive vocalizations. Her therapy swing was reported as an unauthorized structure. A simple foldable shade tent they used to protect Ava from harsh sunlight was deemed non-compliant with outdoor furnishing regulations. The HOA sent a notice demanding its removal, citing a violation of shade structure uniformity. Uniformity, as if joy needed to match the color scheme. Lily tried to stay calm. She tried to speak to Karen directly, hoping to appeal to her decency. But every conversation felt like walking through a maze made of mirrors. Every fact she presented was twisted. Every request met with a smile that didn't reach the eyes. One afternoon, Lily found herself at another board meeting. She wasn't scheduled to speak, but she stood up anyway. "I just want to ask," she began, voice shaking, "what part of my daughter's wheelchair or therapy swing is a threat to this neighborhood?" Karen didn't even flinch. "This isn't about your daughter, Miss Hart," she said smoothly. "It's about process. You bypassed protocol. You ignored guidelines that every resident agrees to follow when they join our community." Lily's breath caught. "I didn't ignore anything. I asked. I emailed. I got no reply." Karen's smile grew colder. "I'm sorry you feel unheard, but the rules apply equally to everyone." And with that, the gavel hit the table. Conversation over. Except it wasn't equal. Lily knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. But no one said a word. They looked at their hands, their coffee cups, the walls, anywhere but at her. She wasn't just being targeted, she was being erased. Slowly, methodically, under the pretense of rules. The neighbors began to pull away too. At first, it was subtle, shorter greetings, tight smiles. Then came the awkward silences, invitations that never arrived. The kids who once played with Ava suddenly weren't allowed over anymore. "She's sweet," one mom whispered in the grocery store. "But you know how Karen is. I don't want to get involved." That sentence echoed in Lily's mind for days. I don't want to get involved. How quickly people retreat when comfort is threatened, how easily kindness is replaced with cowardice. But the real breaking point came during a fire drill. The HOA organized a mock safety test for the community. It was a routine event: evacuations, hydrant checks, first responder demos. Lily, always eager to prepare Ava for emergencies, brought her outside, wheeling her carefully to the gathering point. Karen was there, clipboard in hand as always. As the drill concluded, Karen walked up to Lily and said, loud enough for nearby residents to hear, "You should consider staying inside during these. Wheelchair mobility could hinder emergency responders. It's just something to think about." Lily blinked. "Are you suggesting my daughter's safety isn't worth the community's inconvenience?" Karen shrugged. "I'm suggesting we all have responsibilities, Miss Hart. Some of us shouldn't take up more space than necessary." Lily froze. Ava looked up at her, confused. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" Lily knelt down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "No, baby, you're perfect." But inside, her heart was boiling. These weren't just microaggressions. They were targeted attacks masked behind procedure, a systematic dehumanization of her daughter using policies, bylaws, and manufactured outrage. And yet, every time she brought it up to the board, to the neighbors, even on a local HOA forum, she was met with the same infuriating phrase: "Karen's just doing her job." But what happens when that job becomes a weapon? When empathy is sacrificed for order? When rules outweigh humanity? Lily had moved to Willow Creek for peace, for a new beginning. But what she had walked into was a battleground where the enemy didn't wear a uniform, she wore pearls and a permanent smile. But that smile was beginning to crack, and Lily was done playing by the rules. It was supposed to be a good day. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting golden light across Willow Creek's manicured lawns. A breeze rustled the leaves as birds chirped over the distant hum of lawnmowers and sprinklers. Ava had just received her new wheelchair, sleek, custom-fitted, painted in her favorite sky blue color with butterfly decals on the wheels. It was a gift hard-won through months of insurance calls, paperwork, and a small online fundraiser set up by Lily's former coworker. When it arrived that morning, Lily cried. Ava squealed with joy. For a child who relied on mobility aids to live a full life, this chair wasn't just equipment, it was freedom. So, when Ava asked to wheel herself down to the small community park just 2 blocks away, for the very first time on her own, Lily hesitated only for a moment. She checked the time, adjusted Ava's gloves, kissed her cheek, and reminded her to stay on the sidewalk. "I'll be there in 10 minutes," she said. "I just need to finish this call." Ava smiled and waved, her hands expertly guiding the new chair. Her confidence made Lily proud. She never expected that those next 10 minutes would change everything. At the far end of the park, just past the rose bushes and the empty basketball court, Karen stood beside a bench, pretending to water the plants near the fence. No one else was around. The other children were at school. The park was quiet. Ava rolled in, humming, admiring how smooth and fast her new chair moved. She didn't even notice Karen at first. "Nice new toy," Karen said. Her voice clipped, loud enough to make Ava flinch. The girl turned slowly, smile fading. "It's not a toy," she said quietly. "It's my new chair." Karen walked closer, her heels clicking sharply against the path. She began, crouching slightly, so her face was closer to Ava's. "You shouldn't get too comfortable pretending you're normal." Ava blinked, unsure what she'd just heard. Karen leaned in further, her tone dropping to a vicious whisper. "You'll never walk again, sweetheart. So stop pretending like you belong here." Ava froze. Her fingers gripped the armrests of her chair. Her voice caught in her throat. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her world seemed to tilt, not from motion, but from weight. Karen straightened up, adjusted her jacket, and turned with that same empty smile. Ava sat motionless for several long seconds before wheeling herself back home. Slower this time, unsure of herself, unsure of the world she thought she was safe in. Lily was waiting outside the house when Ava returned. She could tell something was wrong immediately. Ava's eyes were red, her lips trembling, her hands gripping the wheels with too much force. "Honey!" Lily rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" Ava opened her mouth, and at first nothing came. But then the words spilled out in fragments. "The park. Karen. The whisper. That awful sentence." Lily's blood ran cold. She stood, fuming, shaking, and marched down the street toward Karen's house, Ava's words still echoing in her mind. She said, "I'll never walk again, Mom." Lily rang the doorbell 3 times. No answer. She knocked louder. Then again. Finally, the door creaked open. Karen stood in the frame, arms crossed. "I need to talk to you," Lily snapped, voice shaking. Karen raised a brow. "About what?" "You know what? You cornered my daughter. You told her she'd never walk again. What kind of person says something like that to a child?" Karen's face twisted slightly, just for a second, a flicker of discomfort or calculation. Then she smirked. "I think your daughter misunderstood me. Or perhaps made it up." Lily's jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" "I've been nothing but civil," Karen continued. "I saw her at the park. I said hello. That's it. If she's inventing stories, well, perhaps you need to consider who's really influencing her perception." Lily stared at her, stunned. "You are vile," she whispered. Karen shrugged. "I'm sorry you feel that way." And with that, the door shut. That night, while Lily was washing dishes and Ava was watching cartoons inside, the soft crash came. At first, it sounded like a trash bin tipping over. Then another bang. A crack. Then silence. Lily rushed outside, and what she saw turned her knees to water. Ava's brand new wheelchair lay, on its side in the driveway, completely demolished. One wheel bent inward, the backrest slashed, one armrest torn off and flung across the yard. The delicate joystick, the one connected to Ava's mobility controls, smashed like someone had stomped it with a boot. Lily screamed. She dropped to her knees, sobbing, her hands running across the wreckage like she could somehow fix it with touch alone. Ava came out moments later and stopped at the doorway, silent. She didn't cry. She just looked at the broken chair, then at her mom, and said in the softest voice imaginable, "I guess Karen was right." Lily broke then. She gathered every ounce of strength in her body, stood up, and stormed toward her neighbor's house. But before she even got to Karen's door, she noticed something strange. The security camera mounted on her own porch had been turned upward, no longer facing the driveway. She ran back and checked the footage. Nothing. The entire window of time. Gone. Corrupted. As if someone had either disabled it remotely or had help. Lily called the HOA board, left voicemails, reported the incident to local police, filed a complaint, but no one offered help. There were no eyewitnesses. The neighborhood stayed quiet. She begged the HOA to access community gate surveillance, hoping something had been caught there, but was told the system had been under maintenance that night. Convenient. In a matter of hours, everything Ava had gained, her sense of freedom, her hope, her smile, was crushed beneath a tide of cruelty and silence. Lily sat by her daughter's bedside that night, watching her stare blankly at the ceiling. "I'm so sorry," Lily whispered. Ava didn't respond. And in that deafening quiet, Lily made a vow. This wouldn't end in whispers, not in shame, not in broken metal and gaslit lies. She would fight for Ava, for justice, for the truth, because no child, no human being should ever be made to feel like a burden in their own home. The house, once filled with laughter and music and Ava's breathless stories about the birds she saw in the trees, fell into a silence so thick it was suffocating. Ava stopped asking to go outside. Her new wheelchair, the one that had made her feel fast, free, and unstoppable, was gone, and with it, something inside her had vanished too. Her bright eyes dulled, her energy drained. She no longer rolled to the window to wave at Miles when he biked past. She barely spoke at all. She didn't even want the TV on. "I just want to lie here," she told Lily one evening, voice flat. "There's no point if I'm just going to get hurt again." That single sentence shattered Lily's heart more than the broken wheelchair ever could. She tried everything, called therapists, asked the insurance company for emergency assistance, tried to repair what she could from the mangled wreckage, but the joystick was gone and the frame was unsalvageable. The insurer rejected her second claim. Only one chair covered every 36 months. No exceptions, not even for vandalism. So, Lily applied for every grant she could find, contacted nonprofits, wrote long emails explaining the situation. Some promised to review. Most didn't respond at all. Every day Ava stayed in bed was another day she missed therapy, another day her muscles weakened, another day her spirit slipped further away. And through it all, Karen said nothing. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer help. She didn't even acknowledge what had happened. But somehow, Lily could still feel her presence in every ignored email, every brushed-off report, every glance from a neighbor who suddenly couldn't meet her eyes. The silence spread like a fog. The same people who once smiled and waved now closed their doors a little faster when Lily walked by. The kids who once played with Ava no longer came around. Parents who used to stop for small talk now turned down different streets during their evening walks. Lily knocked on a few doors, tried to speak to her neighbors, not to accuse, just to ask if they'd seen anything the night the wheelchair was destroyed. Most weren't home. Some were too busy. One woman peeked through her curtains and simply shook her head before closing them. No one wanted to be involved. Not against the HOA. Not against her. But not everyone was silent. A few days after the incident, as Lily sat on the porch with her laptop open and her eyes red from hours of writing appeal letters, an elderly voice called out from across the yard. "Hard week, huh?" It was Mrs. Dwyer, a retired schoolteacher who lived alone in the yellow house 3 doors down. She shuffled over slowly, leaning on her walker, and took a seat on the porch without asking. "I saw them," she said plainly, "late that night. Karen and her nephew. He's the one who did it." She watched. Lily's breath caught. Mrs. Dwyer continued, her voice low. "He had a toolbox. Smashed the chair like it was scrap metal. I called the HOA the next day. They never called back. Why didn't you say something sooner?" Lily whispered, half in shock, half in disbelief. "I'm old," Mrs. Dwyer said with a tired smile. "They don't take me seriously. But I've lived here longer than Karen's been alive. And this isn't the first time." She went on to tell Lily about another resident, a young veteran with a service dog and PTSD who had been harassed over unauthorized pet policies until he moved out, a mother with an autistic son who was fined for excessive noise, a family with a child who used a feeding tube reported for unsightly medical equipment left on the porch. Karen had a pattern. A quiet war against anyone who disrupted the illusion of perfection. She clung to disabled, vulnerable, different. They didn't fit her image of Willow Creek. And now Ava had become her latest target. Mrs. Dwyer offered to sign a statement. She didn't have footage, but she'd swear to what she saw. Lily thanked her with a hug that lasted far too long. That night, as she sat beside Ava's bed, gently combing her daughter's hair, Lily whispered, "I know you're tired, but I want you to know something, baby. We're not alone anymore. And I'm not going to stop fighting until you're rolling through that park again, with your head high." Ava didn't respond, but for the first time in days, her fingers curled gently around her mother's wrist. It was small, but it was a start. Lily had always believed that kindness could fix most things, that understanding and grace could win even the hardest battles. But when Karen watched her daughter's wheelchair be destroyed and responded with smug silence, something snapped inside her. The pain hardened into resolve. No more pleading. No more waiting for someone else to do the right thing. She was a mother, and now she was at war. Lily began documenting everything. Every HOA letter, every passive-aggressive note, every interaction with Karen was recorded discreetly on her phone. She took time-stamped photographs of the destroyed wheelchair, the twisted ramp, the so-called violations. She compiled the voicemail from the HOA that claimed the camera system was under maintenance the very night of the incident. She even returned to Mrs. Dwyer's home with a written witness statement signed with shaky hands but iron conviction. Then she reached out beyond Willow Creek. She contacted local disability rights organizations. She posted on neighborhood forums, Reddit threads, even Facebook groups, anywhere people would listen. Most posts were ignored or deleted, but one caught the eye of a local investigative journalist named Tasha Ramirez, known for exposing HOA abuse cases. Tasha agreed to meet. Over coffee and tearful storytelling, Lily handed over her evidence, and Tasha promised to dig deeper. Within 2 weeks, Lily's story appeared on a local news segment titled "A Neighborhood of Exclusion: When Rules Hurt the Vulnerable." The piece was short, but it struck a nerve. Parents reached out. Advocates offered help. Donations began trickling in for a new wheelchair. But with attention came retaliation. Karen fired back with a vengeance. The HOA issued Lily 3 new violation notices, one for an unapproved flower bed, another for noncompliant lawn height, and a third for disruptive community behavior during the board meeting. Neighbors began whispering that Lily was drama, that she just wanted attention. Someone slashed her car tires in the middle of night. Anonymous emails arrived telling her to move back to where she came from. But she didn't break. She installed new cameras, encrypted and cloud-backed this time. She filed a formal complaint with the city's Department of Neighborhood Affairs. When they brushed her off, she filed another with the state's Fair Housing Commission, citing discrimination against a disabled child. But the final blow came when Ava's physical therapist informed them that Ava's condition had begun regressing. Without proper equipment and consistent therapy, she was losing muscle tone, coordination, even her confidence in using mobility aids. That's when Lily made the decision. She wasn't just going to survive this. She was going to end it. She found a civil rights attorney who specialized in HOA abuse cases. With the evidence she'd collected, Mrs. Dwyer's testimony, the media coverage, and a copy of the HOA's own bylaws contradicting several of their enforcement actions, Lily filed a civil lawsuit against both Karen and the Willow Creek HOA for targeted harassment, discrimination, emotional damages, and destruction of medical property. The moment the papers were served, Karen's smile vanished for the first time. The war was no longer in whispers and fine print. It was real, it was public, and it was going to court. Lily stood outside the county courthouse days later, holding Ava's hand as reporters snapped photos and microphones were thrust in her face. She looked tired but fierce. No longer just a mother, she was a force. A storm with a purpose. And deep down, Karen knew the game was over. The rules no longer protected her. Because this mother had learned how to fight back, and she wasn't going to stop until justice rolled back through her front yard, one wheel at a time. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and paper, the kind of scent that clings to rooms where justice has long been debated but not always served. The walls were lined with dusty law books, and the judge's bench loomed, like an altar, not of worship, but of reckoning. It was quiet, too quiet, except for the shuffling of papers and the occasional murmur of lawyers preparing their arguments. But for Lily, it felt like the loudest room she had ever stood in. Every heartbeat pounded like a drum, Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed Ava's hair. Seated beside her, dressed in her soft blue dress and new borrowed wheelchair, not yet hers, just a loaner until the case was settled, Karen sat across the room with the poise of someone who had never been told no. Dressed in her tailored blazer, her hair in a stiff bun, and her lips set in that familiar passive-aggressive smile. Her lawyer leaned in now, and then, whispering instructions. She nodded calmly, eyes focused ahead, confident, composed, and utterly convinced of her own righteousness. The proceedings began with formality. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with eyes sharp as steel, read the allegations. Civil damages, harassment, discrimination, emotional trauma, destruction of property. Karen shifted slightly but showed no concern. This was just another HOA meeting to her, just another chance to hide behind policies and procedures that chronological. She showed the HOA notices, the photos of the destroyed wheelchair, the recordings of HOA conversations, and Lily's repeated unanswered attempts to resolve things peacefully. She laid out the full picture of harassment, not in emotional terms, but in logic, law, and fact. The courtroom listened in pin-drop silence. Then came the audio recording. Lily had managed to retrieve one short clip from a voice-activated recorder she'd left running in her purse during a community meeting, a clip where Karen, unaware she was being recorded, said, "Some families just don't belong here. This neighborhood is about standards, and pity doesn't get you a free pass." The room shifted. Even the judge's eyes narrowed. Karen's lawyer objected, arguing the context was unclear, the intent uncertain. But the damage was done. The mask had cracked. Next came the testimony from Mrs. Dwyer. The elderly neighbor walked slowly to the stand, gripping her cane, and looked directly at the judge. "I saw her," she said clearly. Karen stood there and watched that man destroy that child's wheelchair. She didn't stop him. She didn't call the police. She just stood there. Karen's lawyer challenged her memory, her eyesight, her timing. Mrs. Dwyer didn't flinch. "My eyes may be old," she snapped, "but I know what hatred looks like." And it was standing right there in a flowered blouse. There was a soft ripple of gasps in the courtroom. Lily looked over at Karen, and for the first time, there was no smile, just a tightening of the jaw. Then came Ava. Marissa gently wheeled her forward. The courtroom went still again. Even the judge leaned forward. Ava was nervous. Her voice quivered, but she spoke. "She told me I'd never walk again," she said softly, staring down at her lap. "She said I didn't belong here. And then my chair got broken. It was brand new, and I didn't do anything wrong." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. She wasn't the only one. Even the court reporter paused, blinking rapidly. The judge cleared her throat, her voice softer than before. "Thank you, sweetheart. You were very brave." Karen took the stand next. She swore in. She raised her hand. She looked every part the polished professional. And then she lied. She claimed she had always supported Ava, that the rules were applied equally, that Lily had been the aggressor, that the destroyed wheelchair was probably an accident or an unfortunate misunderstanding. She claimed she wasn't even home that night, but the courtroom wasn't buying it anymore. Marissa produced cell tower logs showing Karen's phone connected to her home Wi-Fi during the time of the incident. She showed email timestamps contradicting her alibi. Then she held up the HOA's handbook and pointed to a clause Karen had violated herself multiple times with her own unauthorized landscaping. "This isn't about rules," Marissa said, turning to the judge. "This was never about policy. This was about power, about control, about removing anyone who didn't fit her vision of perfection. This was about hate, thinly veiled under bureaucracy." Silence followed. The judge sat back, eyes heavy with thought, her fingers steepled. Then, at last, she spoke. "I have presided over cases involving fraud, violence, and greed. But what I've seen here today is cruelty wrapped in paperwork. I find it disgraceful." She ruled in Lily's favor. The HOA was ordered to pay for the full replacement cost of Ava's wheelchair, therapy compensation, and emotional damages. Karen was fined personally. More importantly, she was removed from her position as HOA president effective immediately. The HOA board was ordered to undergo mandatory sensitivity training and compliance reviews. As Karen left the courtroom, she didn't meet anyone's eyes, not even her own attorney's. She moved quickly, her heels no longer clicking, more like scrambling. Lily stood outside the courthouse with Ava in her arms. The air smelled cleaner somehow, the world lighter. Reporters swarmed. Cameras rolled, but she didn't speak right away. She looked down at her daughter, who was smiling again, really smiling, and then she said to the crowd, not as a victim, but as a mother, this wasn't about a wheelchair. This was about dignity, about telling our children that they matter even when the world says they don't. In the weeks that followed the courtroom victory, something in the air around Willow Creek shifted. For the first time since Lily and Ava had moved in, neighbors who once averted their eyes now stopped to wave. Some knocked gently on their door with warm casseroles and hesitant apologies. A few of the neighborhood children even dropped off handmade cards for Ava, shyly asking if she wanted to play again when she felt ready. But the real change, the one that mattered most, didn't come from the outside. It came from the little girl who had once believed the world was safer than it had shown her. Ava, who had retreated into silence, began to bloom again. Her new wheelchair arrived, sleeker, stronger, even more comfortable than the last, but it wasn't just a chair this time. It was a symbol of her mother's strength, her own courage, and the fact that they weren't invisible anymore. One bright morning, just as the sun slipped between the clouds and warmed the porch, Ava looked up from her coloring book and said softly, "Mom, I want to go outside again." Lily nearly dropped the cup in her hands. She turned, heart pounding, tears already welling up. "Are you sure, baby?" Ava nodded. "I'm not scared anymore. You made it safe." And so they went, down the same sidewalk where it had all begun, past the spot where her chair had once been wrecked, past the bushes where Karen once stood like a shadow of fear. But now, that place held no power over them. Ava rolled with confidence, the butterflies on her wheels catching the sunlight, and Lily walked beside her, not just as a mother anymore, but as a protector, a warrior, a woman who had turned pain into purpose. What had once been a battleground had become a garden of quiet victory. The road ahead would still have its bumps. There would be other Karens, other battles, other moments of despair. But now they knew they could face them, together. And as Ava laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever, Lily knew they hadn't just survived the storm. They had come out of it braver, louder, and more unshakably whole than ever before. If this story moved you, if it stirred something in your heart, if it made you angry, made you cry, or made you remember a time when someone used rules to silence what was right, then don't just scroll past. Speak up. This isn't just about one little girl in a wheelchair. It's about every child who's ever been made to feel small for being different, every mother who's been dismissed for defending her child, and every community that chooses silence over justice. Share this story. Talk about it. Stand with families who are fighting invisible battles behind closed doors. No HOA, no institution, no neighbor with a clipboard should ever have the power to rob a child of dignity or joy. We must demand better, not just in courts, but on our streets, in our neighborhoods, and in the quiet moments where real courage is born. And if you believe that stories like this deserve to be heard, then please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because silence protects the powerful, but stories empower the weak. Let's be the voice they cannot ignore. Let's build communities, not just neighborhoods.